Hello everyone! Welcome to Katia Plant Scientist Living Room. Today I'm going to show you how to keep your harvest of winter squash and pumpkins pristine for not just 2 months, not 3 months, but 6 to 7 months. Can you believe that squash and pumpkins and all of these delicious things that we harvest in the autumn can keep on going until April? It's true. Most of the squash in the harvest that you see before you were harvested back in September and October of the previous year. Let's cast our minds back and have a look at some photos from when this harvest was fresh off the vine. Let's take a look at how the colors of our familiar squash have changed. But before we talk about that, I would like to say that not all squash have such a long-term staying power. You may have noticed that the great big reddish-orange pumpkins are not here anymore. Unfortunately, they started to go moldy around Christmas time. Those are the Rouge Vif des Étampes. Also conspicuously absent are the winter luxury pumpkins. So it is worth noting that some types of squash and pumpkins just last longer than others, probably due to the structure of their rind, which is the outer layer of the squash. But let's have a look at our current group. What do you notice that's different between the photos from November and this footage from April? That's right, their colors have changed significantly. Perhaps you didn't even recognize some of them. Here are some striking examples. These are the Ayote green squash, and these little cuties were originally a kind of forest green with white stripes. Now, as you can see, they're golden orange with the same kind of white leopard spots. When I cut them open, they'll be just as emerald green as they usually are. Yes, that's right. This type of squash is green inside. That's its distinguishing feature. Others that have changed color are the blue Hubbard squash. So you might be thinking, why is it a blue Hubbard squash? Well, if you remember the photo from Thanksgiving time, it was originally a sort of baby blue color, and now it's turned this beautiful peachy pink. So what's going on with our squash, and why are they changing color in storage? And also, why do I have them in my living room instead of a storage shed? Let's dig into how squash ripen. Squash do most of their ripening on the vine. That's right. In order to get squash with the best flavor that are likely to last the longest, it is best to leave them on their vines out in the elements as long as it's not freezing, as long as possible. When squash undergo their full ripening and maturation process while still attached to their vine, they will last the longest and have the deepest color inside and the richest flavor. Another thing that will show you that a squash naturally ripened is the corkiness of its stem. So as you can see, it's kind of porous and bumpy and has little holes in it, kind of like a cork. This is something that you often see in commercially produced squash, is that their stems are rather dried out and don't have that same corky texture. So if you have a corky stem, that shows that it was naturally ripened and is probably of excellent quality. So another thing to bear in mind about squash is that they do change color. So even though their interior color and flavor is more determined by the amount of time that they were allowed to ripen naturally on the vine, the exterior color can be changed by how you store them. With a lot of commercially produced squash, they are kept at cooler temperatures and shorter times, so they tend to have more green on them. But as you notice, my squash are vivid colors like peach, white, orange, and red. A lot of these started out being more greenish or duller colored when they were first harvested. So what's happening here in this color change? Here's another example of one that was originally green and has turned this lovely terracotta color, is that Chloroplasts are being converted into chromoplasts. These are tiny subcellular structures that were originally producing energy for the plant through photosynthesis, but when it is ripening, these are converted into chromoplasts. So that means that they convert from being doing photosynthesis to simply being little receptacles to store plant color molecules called carotenoids. So that's why we have the change from green to yellow. It's called degreening, and it signifies that chloroplasts are turning into chromoplasts filled with beautiful bright colored carotenoids. To facilitate the carotenoid production, it's recommended to keep squash between the temperatures of 10 degrees Celsius and 15 degrees Celsius. This can be a little hard to achieve in outdoor storage because it often gets chillier and also more humid. And with higher humidity, there's more of a risk of your squash getting ruined by fungus attack. So that's why it's important, even if you have them in a nice, cool but dry and moderately conditioned place like a living room, to always be checking them every couple of weeks for any spots of mold. So why I keep them here is because this lovely historic fireplace from this cottage that was originally built in the 1620s is that this fireplace is the perfect place to keep squash. That's because they have a mix of sitting on cool stone while also being exposed to the ambient room temperature. In this cottage, we usually keep the ambient room temperature somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius during the winter. In other words, that's the perfect conditions for squash to ripen and degreen to take on their vivid colors. I also find that keeping them inside in the nice, cool fireplace also helps prevent fungus because the living room is kept at a more balanced humidity, whereas some outdoor storage places like sheds can get too humid. Also, because this is, a nice clean living room, there aren't many fungal spores around, so they're at less risk of getting fungus damaged. It's worth noting that if squash are exposed to temperatures lower than 10 degrees Celsius, they sometimes can get chilling damage, which is where parts of the rind get compromised or damaged and make them easier to be infected by fungi. I hope that this inspires you to hang on to your squash harvest and look after them well through the winter so that you can have delicious squash to eat during the spring. Although I know not all houses have a stone hearth, if you have anything, I think that other kinds of fireplaces with cool stone would be very suitable. And I think that also just generally keeping your squash in the house, kind of like natural works of art. I mean, look at how pretty they are. They're just like nature's sculptures. I love having them around and seeing them every day. So I think that keeping them in your living room or a somewhat cooler room of your house over winter is a great way to hang on to your harvest. Stay curious about plants, everyone, and I'll see you next time.